Hi, it's July 4th, and this is today's video on Hurricane Beryl. As is always the case in these videos, the hottex pressure are just mine, and if you're going to make any decisions ahead of the storm, look towards your local weather office, local emergency management, and the National Hurricane Center for the best information local to you. So we're continuing to watch Beryl as it progresses further west in the Caribbean, nearly out of there now, getting close to the Yucatan Peninsula. And the recent trends today have not been good for the coastline of Mexico. If you're on the coast, you're really hoping some of this shear that remains really just kills the system off, or at least weakens it a bit. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is likely another phase of intensification, and quick intensification at that, potentially, as the system tracks generally towards the west-northwest. Now, shear has likely been decreasing today. You can see that in the satellite imagery, it appears to be moving a little bit slower than it was yesterday. Now, some of it will probably be a bit of an illusion because we are now on the continental US sector, so we're getting satellite images more frequently than we were with the full disk imagery. But still, we have seen on radar imagery as well, there is an apparent slowdown with the eye. So we're starting to see the trade winds now decrease from their very high speed throughout much of the Caribbean. And this is likely decreasing the vertical wind shear that we're having over the storm. Now, another thing is that we have now this cutoff upper low in the Gulf of Mexico. This used to be that Tut cell, which is just another way to say an upper trough, that was draped across the Western Caribbean. That has now been split in two. One part is over here in the Western Atlantic, coming into the Central Atlantic, and now we have this cutoff upper low that is now backing off towards the west and southwest through the Gulf of Mexico. And one thing this low is doing is it's still likely imparting a little bit of southwesterly flow onto the storm. So you still have a little bit of that vertical wind shear. But one thing it is doing is you'll note that if you have the low like this, you have southerly flow on the east side. And we've noticed this afternoon quite a significant increase in upper level cirrus clouds now streaming away from the hurricane. This may be this upper low helping to aid this poleward outflow channel that Beryl has. And this, with the trade wind slowing down, may be getting the system into a lower shear environment capable of intensifying a little bit quicker. Now, we do have our aircraft plane in there. The Air Force is flying in right now. Now, we don't have the full data set from their first two passes, but we'll probably have that at the end of the video. We'll check into that at the end of the video. But you can see right now, the system is got a pressure about 964 millibars. Looks like the actual drop zone was about, we'll go here to about 962 millibars. Now, that is significant because the pressure earlier today, which I don't have the drops on to show you it, but we had an Air Force plane go in earlier. They did the same thing. They dropped the drops on in the eye, and they found the pressure on that about 974 millibars. So we've had a pressure drop of about 10 to 12 millibars since that recon plane, which was probably, 6 hours ago. That's a pretty good rate of pressures lowering in the center, and this is probably indicative of re-strengthening happening. Now, I'm not exactly sure how well defined these southeastern and northwestern eye walls were in the prior recon passes, but this is pretty strong on the southeast side, which I know last night it was not that strong on the southeastern side of Beryl. So it looks like it is getting its act together more. We're about to see again that northeastern pass, and I wouldn't be surprised if when they fly through here they find data supporting a major hurricane again, just given those rapid pressure falls. So this is really, not a really good scenario for the Yucatan Peninsula, because we could be looking at, Category 3 hurricane coming in, where we were expecting the system to weaken considerably between after Jamaica and now, but the system has been fairly resilient. And we're now looking at, Category 2, Category 3 coming in. So if you're here in Mexico, make sure you're hunkering down and you're prepared, because tropical storm force winds will be arriving fairly soon, if not already, along that part of the coast, and it's going to be a nasty night tonight as the system comes through. Now, after the system does come through, we're going to be seeing a lot of weakening as the system passes right over the Yucatan Peninsula. You can see that illustrated here in the National Hurricane Center forecast cone, weakening it down to a tropical storm as it crosses the landmass and comes offshore. Now, one key thing to watch for, and this will be very important for the latter half of this forecast, is exactly where does it come offshore into the Gulf of Mexico. Models have been kind of split, and one thing that has been noticeable today, very noticeable, is Beryl has been trending, which again is a fairly common thing, it seems like, with Beryl, to track north of what model guidance anticipates throughout this part of the Caribbean. We've had a lot of models try and put it, we talked about last night where the landfall range was probably about, Cozumel down to the Belize-Mexico border. Now we're likely honing in on Cozumel, maybe a little bit further south to the central coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. And we talked about yesterday how if it did come a little bit further north, this could allow the system to maintain itself a little bit more, a little bit better, because it wouldn't have to deal with as much land interaction. But also, it could change the forecast drastically in this part of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, you'll see on this forecast, we have a range here of possibilities by 2 p.m. on Friday. And what we're going to have to watch for is where does it come offshore? Does it come off here, here, or here? These launching points will tell a lot when we come offshore tomorrow afternoon. And that will likely give us a lot of answers onto what is going to happen eventually towards the western Gulf of Mexico. Now, immediately for those in the western Gulf of Mexico, if you're going to prepare for this storm, you have a lot of time to prepare. You can see the earliest arrival for tropical storm force winds is looking to be not this evening, Saturday evening or Sunday morning. So preparations should be done, by Saturday evening, your time. Now, one thing about the track is that this is a very sensitive forecast that we're dealing with along this part of the coastline. And that has to do mainly with the way Beryl is approaching this part of the coast. You can see that the coast is oriented pretty vertically here. It's fairly vertical if you go from north to south. We don't really have a lot of landmass here like down here in the Bay of Campeche, where you have a lot of land stretching across west and east. And this makes the track forecast difficult, trying to forecast the landfall, because a little change here, a couple dozen miles north or south, could make all the difference. You could have the system tracking further south, and this comes into northeastern Mexico. But if it, comes offshore a little bit further north, say a couple dozen miles, that's not a big difference overall. But once it comes to the end of the forecast period, this could be, coming up towards Corpus Christi. We've even seen some forecast solutions today trying to get the storm to come up near Houston and Galveston. There's a large range of potential landfall spots when, in reality, it would not take a lot of change for this hurricane to actually come to those areas. And this makes it especially sensitive when we're talking about the overall landfall spot. Now, if we look at track guidance from today, you'll see that a lot of models are still split, but you'll notice that if Beryl is on the northern side of the envelope, which it has been all day today, we're looking at the system come up a little bit further north and maybe coming towards the coastline of Texas. And what we can tell you today, at least what I can say, is that the trend today has been having the storm come ashore further north, say around Brownsville to the central Texas coastline. This is the current track guidance from various other different models. And you can see that we actually have a good consistency on these, of a good clump of them coming into around Brownsville. Now, one thing that's very important when you're looking at these maps, and there's a reason this watermark is here on the top right, these maps can often be a bit misleading. You can see that this shows that you have a lot of certainty on a landfall in Brownsville, for example, when in reality the actual envelope of tracks is much larger than that. So if you're looking at this for preparation, just keep that in mind. It's best to use the National Hurricane Center forecast cone for this. But I'm showing you this for a reason, because we have seen in this set the track generally nudge towards the South Texas coast throughout the day today. And that seems to be a common trend with models. So you can see the H-Wharf, which I'll go to the latest run so we can see the current expectation from it. It is on the further north end of the track consensus, having this come in as a hurricane potentially into southern Texas. Now, the large-scale pattern is fairly known right now for this system. You can see that we still have, these two high-pressure systems getting brought up or broken up, and we have this trough digging in. But again, the question is, where does it come offshore in the Yucatan Peninsula? Now, in terms of the intensity forecast, this is also dependent on track. If the system does take a track like the National Hurricane Center forecast cone, it's likely going to struggle to get all too much stronger than a minimal hurricane on this kind of a track, as the system will need about a day to recover. That's usually what you have. Apologies if you could hear that's the firework. It's 4th of July in the U.S., but it will have some time that it's needed to recover once the system comes offshore of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And they usually take about a day to do that. And after that day, it really only has a day to intensify. And by this point, it's a tropical storm, and you can see it only gets to a minimal hurricane. But if it stays further north, then you have the storm tracking further east here off the coast of Mexico and Texas. And by this point, the system now has more time over water, and also the environment may be a little bit more favorable once it gets further north here towards the Texas coast, and this could end up resulting in a stronger storm if it does come a little bit further north the forecast up to the central Texas coastline. You can see this if we look at the HWRF again, this is showing potentially a Category 2 hurricane, and you saw that on the model when I flipped it before. The old run from this morning actually showed a major hurricane out of this. Now, this is probably on the higher end of all the potential that we have for this, but the HWRF has been doing well with the storm, and it does highlight the potential that if the system stays offshore, we could potentially see a phase of more intensification as the environment gets more favorable. This is a 200 millibar flow plot from the GFS. You see, here's your upper level low as it backs further west into northern Mexico. And this may still be imparting a little bit of southerly shear, but the storm is going to be tracking north, so that shear will probably be minimized. And as it comes towards the coast, we have this long wave trough that we've talked about. This is what's breaking apart those two areas of high pressure. And it may open up even more healthy jet stream here, or jet streak, that may be more favorable for the poleward outflow channel and may allow a quicker phase of intensification. And that's likely what the HWRF is seeing in those forecasts. So really the key messages today for, Texas and Mexico is just pay very close attention to the storm. And even though you're in, say, Corpus Christi or Victoria up the coast of central Texas, and you see the center track coming into south of Brownsville, don't take that and just say, okay, it's going to miss me. I'm completely out of the way of this hurricane, as that is far from the truth. And you can see this entire forecast cone, which this is showing the potential error ranges of where the storm center could go. You're included within that, and it's entirely possible that the system comes your way, and we could be having a hurricane come your way. Now, alongside that, one thing is, even if it does come in south, we're probably going to get a lot of rainfall from this, and you can see this highlighted in the Weather Prediction Center rainfall forecast over the next 7 days. As a hurricane comes in, we get a ton of rainfall. This is widespread, 3, 4, 5 inches or more of rainfall in Texas, which in some cases this is good. We need the rainfall. We have a significant drought ongoing here. But too much of this at once can easily lead to a lot of flooding issues, especially when you're in a drought. So we really need to be paying attention to the flooding potential here in Texas, and continue to watch the hurricane forecast from the National Hurricane Center over the next few days, as it will be shifting around over the next several days. That's all that I've got for today. Apologies for the fireworks in the background. Happy 4th of July to everyone in the United States. I'll have more videos as the system continues across the Yucatan Peninsula into the Gulf of Mexico as it goes throughout the weekend time frame. Stay safe in Mexico as it progresses through. And one thing before I leave, we'll check the recon data, which we'll get that after the video releases. If anything drastic happens, I'll post it on my Twitter page. That's all that I've got for today. Thanks for watching.